They said she was too weak, unworthy of the battlefield. But when 4 enemy bullets tore through Abigail Reynolds' body in the Iraqi desert, she didn't fall. She carried 2 severely wounded SEALs for 3 miles, calling in artillery strikes while fighting. What secret turned an emotional woman into a hero who changed the U.S. military? Imagine the scorching sand underfoot, the crack of gunfire echoing like thunder, and a young woman bloodied defiant, refusing to let her comrades die. Who shot her? Why did she still stand, her heart pounding, not with fear, but with unbreakable resolve? This isn't just a tale of survival. It's a story that stirs the soul, evoking the raw sacrifice and quiet patriotism that so many of you have known in your own lives. The blood staining the desert floor, the weight of wounded brothers on her shoulders, it calls to mind the fathers, husbands, and sons who faced the jungles of Vietnam, their courage forged in fire. Abigail's journey uncovers a mystery deeper than war, how one woman's so-called weakness became her greatest strength, challenging prejudices and reshaping destinies. Stay with us, for in her story lies the timeless truth that true heroism comes from the heart, a legacy that echoes through generations. In the dusty haze of Forward Operating Base, Liberty nestled amid the relentless heat of Iraq in 2008, Specialist Abigail Reynolds, Abby, to those who bothered to know her, stood as a quiet enigma among the hardened soldiers. Her tanned white skin spoke of long days under the merciless sun. Her dark hair pulled back into a practical ponytail that framed a face both striking and resolute, with sharp features softened by eyes that held a depth of unspoken stories. At 25, she carried an athletic build, honed not just by military drills, but by an inner drive that few understood. Through the collar of her uniform, a faint glimpse of her eagle tattoo peeked out, a symbol inked after her father's passing. Its wings spread wide, as if ready to soar beyond the confines of doubt. They called her Whisper. Behind her back, a nickname born not from malice, but from the kind of dismissive pity reserved for someone deemed too fragile for the grit of war. It started during her first deployment, when reports of civilian casualties in a nearby village brought tears to her eyes during a briefing. The men around her, veterans with faces etched by loss, shifted uncomfortably at her open emotion. "War's no place for whispers," one had muttered, and the label stuck. Despite her superior skills in artillery coordination, able to plot grid references and fire missions with a precision that outpaced even the certified forward observers, she was sidelined from patrols. "You're better at the tech, Reynolds," her superiors would say. But Abby knew the truth in a world that prized stoic detachment. Her heart's refusal to harden made her a liability in their eyes. Yet it was that very heart that had brought her here. Letters from her mother, yellowed and worn from repeated readings, were tucked away in her footlocker like sacred relics. They told of her father, a Marine who had perished in the jungles of Vietnam when Abby was just a child. "He felt everything deeply just like you," her mother wrote in one, describing how he'd weep over fallen comrades, but charge forward anyway, his emotions fueling a courage that saved lives. Those words had propelled Abby to enlist after high school, moving from a quiet life in rural Ohio to the Army's ranks. She sought to honor him, to prove that sensitivity wasn't weakness. But the inner wounds lingered, the ache of a fatherless childhood, the fear that her tears might one day cost her everything. In quiet moments, she'd trace the eagle on her back, a reminder of his last letter. "Fly high, Abby, even when the world tries to clip your wings." Her days blurred into a routine of quiet resilience. Mornings began before dawn in the communications tent, where she'd monitor radio traffic, her fingers dancing over consoles to ensure clear signals amid the static of insurgent interference. She spoke Arabic fluently, a skill picked up from self-study, allowing her to intercept enemy chatter that others missed. But Major Harlan, a grizzled officer with a bias as old as the military itself, kept her chained to logistics. "Women like you handle the back end, Reynolds," he'd gruffly assign, tasking her with equipment manifests and supply coordination. "Leave the real fight to those who can compartmentalize." It stung, this underestimation, especially when her marksmanship scores topped the base practiced in secret, during off hours her shots ringing true as if guided by an unseen force. Still, Abby poured her soul into preparation. She'd pore over terrain maps of Sector 7 near Ramadi, memorizing every wadi and ridge, every potential ambush point. Her emotional investment wasn't a flaw. It was her edge driving her to anticipate dangers that detached minds overlooked. In the evenings, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, she'd sit alone, rereading her mother's letters. "Your father would be proud." One ended, foreseeing the humanity in this madness. Little did she know the madness was about to call her name, testing not just her skills, but the very heart others dismissed. And in that crucible, the whisper would become a roar. The afternoon sun hung heavy over Fob Liberty, casting long shadows across the communications tent, where Abby sat hunched over her console. The static hum of radio traffic, a constant companion in the oppressive Iraqi heat. It was a day like any other, monitoring frequencies, logging reports, her skilled hands ensuring the lifeline of information flowed unbroken. But in an instant, the ordinary shattered. A urgent intelligence report crackled through the secure channel, its words slicing through the routine like a knife. SEAL Team 4 had been ambushed in Sector 7, a treacherous stretch of desert near Ramadi, known for its insurgent strongholds and unforgiving terrain. 2 Navy SEALs were down, severely wounded, one critical, the other barely holding on. The team was pinned in a ravine, surrounded by Taliban fighters with superior positions. Extraction was en route, but time was the enemy. Without immediate aid, those men wouldn't make it. Abby's heart seized as she adjusted the dials, her fingers trembling slightly, not from fear, but from a surge of empathy that others might mistake for weakness. The distress calls flooded in raw and desperate from Chief Petty Officer Liam Kane, his voice strained against the backdrop of gunfire and explosions. "Base, this is Viper Lead. We're taking heavy fire, multiple hostiles elevated positions. Hayes and Ramirez are hit bad. We can't move them. Need artillery support and medevac now. Coordinates grid, 42 SQB, 10234, 5678. Repeat, we're losing them." The words echoed in her mind, each plea a hammer blow. Hayes and Ramirez, names she didn't know, but faces she could imagine, brothers in arms like her father had been. The call triggered a flood of memories, her father's letters from Vietnam describing the chaos of ambushes, the agony of watching comrades fall. In those moments, Abby, he'd written, "It's not training that saves you. It's the fire in your soul, the refusal to let good men die alone." She clutched the edge of the console, her eagle tattoo seeming to pulse beneath her uniform, a silent urging to act. But then came the order, delivered with the cold authority of Major Harlan as he stormed into the tent, his face a mask of grim resolve. "Reynolds, you're on comms only. Monitor the traffic relay updates to command. No heroics, stick to your post." His eyes narrowed, the unspoken prejudice hanging in the air like dust. "Women can't handle combat. You'd crack under the pressure. We need clear heads out there, not whispers." The words landed like a gut punch, reinforcing the barriers she'd fought against since enlisting. Sector 7 was a death trap, rocky wadis, perfect for ambushes, IED-littered paths, and enemies who knew the land like their own skin. The SEALs were elite, but even they were vulnerable. Now their lives hanging by the thread of distant support. Abby's mind raced. She knew those grids intimately could call in precise artillery strikes, faster than anyone her Arabic fluency, a tool to anticipate enemy moves. Yet here she was, relegated to the sidelines, because her tears for the innocent marked her as unfit. As the radio continued its frantic chorus, Kane's voice growing weaker, punctuated by the boom of RPGs, Abby's inner turmoil boiled. This wasn't just a mission. It was a call to the core of who she was, an echo of her father's unfinished legacy. The prejudice stung, but the thought of those men bleeding out in the desert far from home stirred something deeper, a resilient heart refusing to stand idle. Little did she know, this moment would propel her beyond the safety of the base, into the fire where whispers turned to thunder. The distress calls from Sector 7 lingered in the air like ghosts. Chief Kane's voice a haunting plea that refused to fade from Abby's mind. She paced the cramped confines of the communications tent, the weight of Major Harlan's orders pressing down like the desert heat itself. "Stay put, Reynolds," his command echoed a barrier as unyielding as the base's fortified walls. But how could she, those SEALs, Hayes and Ramirez, were out there bleeding into the sand, their lives slipping away with every crackle of static. Abby's hands clenched around the radio handset, her knuckles white as the inner storm raged. Her father's words surfaced, unbidden, a lifeline from the past. "Emotions are strength, not weakness, Abby. They remind us why we fight for the souls we can't bear to lose." He'd written that in his final letter from Vietnam before the ambush that claimed him. She could almost feel the crinkled paper in her fingers, smell the faint scent of jungle rain on the pages her mother had preserved. It was that fire he'd described, the one that turned ordinary men into saviors. But what if her fire wasn't enough? What if she charged into that hell and failed, just like he had, leaving behind only echoes of regret for those who loved her? Fear coiled in her chest, a cold serpent, whispering doubts that threatened to paralyze her. Failing like him, the thought was unbearable. Her father had been a hero in stories, but in her memories he was the absence that shaped her world. The empty chair at holidays, her mother's quiet tears in the night. Enlisting had been her way to fill that void, to prove she could carry his legacy without crumbling. Yet here, in the shadow of real danger, the prejudices of the base amplified her self-doubt. She imagined the headlines if she went rogue and fell, "Emotional specialist's reckless act costs lives." Her eagle tattoo itched against her skin, a reminder of wings she wasn't sure she could spread. The mission in Sector 7 was suicide for anyone unprepared. The ravines were death traps laced with sniper nests and IEDs. As a communications expert, she excelled at directing from afar, plotting fire missions with mathematical precision. But out there under fire, the Major's words gnawed at her. Women can't handle combat. Maybe he was right. Maybe her tears for the villagers weren't empathy, but a crack in her armor that would shatter at the first real test. Then came the mockery, sharp as shrapnel from Sergeant Vargas, as he leaned into the tent, his smirk a weapon in itself. Heard the chatter. "Whisper those SEALs need real soldiers, not someone who'll cry at the sight of blood." His laugh was joined by a few others, lingering nearby. Their chuckles, a chorus of dismissal that cut deeper than any blade. Vargas, with his battle scars and bravado, embodied the base's unwritten code. Emotion was for the weak, and women like Abby were perpetual outsiders. "Stick to your radios, girl. Last thing we need is you breaking down out there." The words landed like blows, nearly knocking the fight out of her. She felt the urge to quit surging to retreat to her bunk, bury herself in logs, and manifests let the real heroes handle it. Almost, she turned away, the handset slipping from her grip. Why risk it all for men she didn't know when the world had already labeled her unfit? But in that fragile moment, a small twist pierced the fog, a snippet of intercepted chatter on an unsecured frequency caught by her Arabic fluency during a routine scan. Whispers of coordinates matching the SEAL's position, spoken in hurried Pashto. The infidels walk into our trap. The information was good. Her blood ran cold, leaked from within. The mission compromised by someone on the base, curiosity ignited, mingling with outrage, who would betray their own. It was a secret that demanded answers, pulling her back from the brink. The doubt lingered heavy as her gear, but the spark of injustice fanned her father's words into flame. Failing wasn't an option, not when lives hung in the balance, and a hidden truth beckoned her forward. With a deep breath, she straightened the eagle on her back, urging flight. The call refused. Perhaps, but the heart once stirred could not be silenced. In the dim light of the communications tent, Abby's resolve teetered on the edge. The intercepted Pashto whispers fueling a fire of suspicion that battled her doubts. Who on the base could betray their own? The question gnawed at her, intertwining with the echoes of Chief Kane's desperate calls from Sector 7. She sank onto a crate, pulling out the bundle of her father's letters from her pocket, faded treasures that had traveled with her from Ohio to this forsaken desert. Her fingers traced the familiar handwriting, and she unfolded one, the words leaping out as if spoken aloud. Abby, my girl, learn the artillery like your life depends on it. It's not just coordinates and calculations. It's the discipline to save your teammates when the world falls apart. Emotions aren't your enemy. They're the compass that points true north. He'd penned that during a lull in Vietnam, teaching her, even from afar, the art of fire missions, plotting grids to rain precision hell on the enemy, turning chaos into calculated salvation. The memory washed over her, a mentor's voice from beyond the grave, urging her to see her sensitivity not as a chain, but as the key to unlocking unbreakable strength. But could she trust it now, with lives hanging in the balance and betrayal lurking within her own ranks? As if summoned by her turmoil, the tent flap rustled, and Corporal Mia Torres slipped in her face, etched with quiet determination. Mia, a fellow woman in this man's world, had always been a rare ally, petite but fierce, with stories of her own that bridged generations. Abby, I saw you pacing like a caged lion. What's eating you? Mia's voice was soft, laced with the compassion of someone who'd faced her share of sidelong glances. Abby hesitated, then shared the intercepted chatter, the possible leak that had doomed the SEALs. Mia's eyes widened, but she nodded knowingly. Reminds me of my abuela's tales from World War II. She was a Rosie the Riveter back home building planes while the men fought overseas. But she always said the real battles were the ones against doubt, from others and from within. Mia, she'd tell me, a woman's heart holds the fire that forges victory. Your dad's letters sound like they carried the same wisdom. Touched by the connection, Abby felt a spark ignite. Mia leaned closer, her trust unwavering. I've watched you, Abby. Your artillery skills are unmatched. You plot those grids like a master cartographer. Remember last drill. You called in a fire mission that was spot on, using grid references to pinpoint targets down to the meter. Through their dialogue, Mia broke it down simply as if teaching a cherished sister. Grid reference is your map's language, those 8-digit codes like 42S, QB, 11234, 5S678 that lock onto a spot no bigger than a foxhole, then the fire mission. You radio fire mission grid, specify the target description method of engagement, like high explosive or smoke, and adjust for danger close if friendlies are near. It's not just tech, it's lives saved. Abby nodded the explanation, grounding her, reminding her of hours spent studying under her father's guidance. But Mia, they say I'm too emotional. Whisper, remember, what if I crack? Mia shook her head, reaching into her pack to pull out concealed gear, a compact medkit extra ammo magazines, and a suppressed M4 carbine. That's their blindness, not your flaw. Your eagle tattoo, I've seen it peeking out. Let it soar high, Abby. It's a symbol of freedom, of rising above. My abuela wore a locket with her husband's photo through the war. It gave her strength. This gear, consider it my faith in you. If there's a leak, we can't wait for the brass. Those SEALs need someone who cares enough to act. Her words woven with the freshness of shared female resilience across eras from Dubo Wind factories to Iraq's sands bolstered Abby like a mentor's embrace. The combination of her father's disciplined teachings and Mia's immediate support bridged the gap, turning doubt into determination. As Mia clasped her shoulder, Abby felt the pieces align the artillery knowledge, not as a hobby, but a weapon honed by love and loss. With the secret of the betrayal burning in her mind, and allies both spectral and real at her side, she stood. The call could no longer be refused. It was time to step into the storm, her heart the compass her father had promised. With Mia's words echoing like a rallying cry, and her father's letters a talisman in her pocket, Abby made her choice in the stifling quiet of the tent. The gear Mia had slipped her felt heavy yet reassuring, the compact M4 carbine slung over her shoulder, its suppressor a silent promise of stealth. The radio clipped to her vest, tuned to encrypted channels, and the medkit bulging with bandages, morphine and tourniquets tools for mending what Weir tore apart. Her heart pounded, not just from the risk, but from the surge of purpose that drowned out the whispers of doubt. "This is for you, Dad," she murmured, tracing the eagle tattoo one last time, its wings a symbol of the freedom she was about to claim. Sneaking through the base under the cover of routine patrols, she avoided the watchful eyes of sentries, her athletic frame moving with the grace of someone who'd studied every shadow. The scorching Iraqi sun beat down as she approached the fob gate, its rays turning the barbed wire into a glittering barrier. A guard nodded absently at her fabricated excuse of a perimeter check, and just like that, she crossed, leaving the safety of liberty behind for the unknown vastness of the desert. The air outside hit her like a furnace blast sand, whispering under her boots as she shouldered her load, each step a declaration she would not let those SEALs become another Vietnam tragedy, another fatherless story. The weight of the gear mirrored the burden of her legacy, but it propelled her forward, her ponytail swaying like a pendulum, marking the end of hesitation. The first 2 miles unfolded in a haze of determination and vigilance, the Iraqi landscape a brutal canvas of endless dunes and jagged outcrops that hid dangers in plain sight. Abby's navigation skills, born from countless hours, poring over terrain maps in the dim glow of her bunk, guided her like an invisible hand. She'd memorized the contours of Sector 7 near Ramadi, the wadis that snaked like veins through the earth, the elevation changes that could mean cover or ambush. Stay off the main paths. Her father's letters had advised lessons from jungle trails applied to desert sands. She plotted her route mentally using landmarks, a cluster of sun-bleached rocks. Here, a distant minaret there, avoiding the well-trodden roads where IEDs improvised, explosive devices lurked like buried serpents. These homemade bombs, often crafted from artillery shells and triggered by pressure plates or remote detonators, were the silent killers of Iraq, claiming limbs and lives with indifferent fury. Abby's training kicked in. She scanned for telltale signs, disturbed Earth unusual debris, her eyes sharp, her breath steady despite the heat clawing at her tanned skin. The sun climbed higher, turning her uniform into a sweat-soaked second skin, but she pressed on, sipping from her canteen to stave off dehydration. Memories of her mother's letters surfaced amid the solitude. Your father always said preparation is the soldier's prayer. It was that discipline that kept her alive, now weaving through the terrain with the precision of a ghost. 2 miles in fatigue nipped at her heels, but the radio's occasional bursts, faint updates on the SEAL's deteriorating position spurred her. This wasn't just a trek. It was a bridge from her ordinary world to the crucible where whispers became actions, where emotion transformed into endurance. The illusion of solitude shattered as Abby crested a low dune, her senses alerting her to danger before her eyes confirmed it. A Taliban patrol, 4 figures in loose robes, AK-47s at the ready, emerged from a rocky outcrop, their voices carrying on the wind in urgent Pashto. They'd spotted her a lone intruder in their domain. Heart racing, Abby dropped low, using a cluster of boulders for cover, as the first sniper shot cracked the air, kicking up sand inches from her boot. Her precise marksmanship, honed in secret sessions, back at base, surged to life. She returned fire with controlled bursts from her M4, the suppressor muffling the reports to whispers. But outnumbered, she knew evasion was key. "Base, this is Reynolds. Engaging hostiles at grid. 42 SQB Howie Deinfen. 4321. Request danger close artillery." She radioed, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. Danger close, a call reserved for when friendlies were perilously near the blast zone, risking everything for suppression. She relayed the fire mission swiftly. "Grid reference enemy, in the open, high explosive proximity, fused 3 rounds, fire for effect." The response came quick, the distant thunder of outgoing shells heralding salvation. As explosions rocked the patrol's position, sending debris skyward, Abby's thoughts turned to her mother, the woman who'd raised her on stories of quiet strength, who'd wept over her husband's loss, but never broke. "Hold on for me, Mom," she whispered, the mini-climax of survival touching a well of emotion that propelled her onward. The artillery cleared her path, but the close call lingered, a reminder of the real challenge ahead. Not just the desert, but the betrayal's shadow and the lives depending on her unyielding heart. The desert stretched endlessly before Abby, a merciless expanse where every shadow could conceal death, but her steps carried the weight of newfound resolve. The artillery barrage she'd called in had scattered the initial Taliban patrol, but the echoes of explosions lingered, a grim reminder that the real tests were just beginning. As she pushed deeper into hostile territory, the sun dipped lower, casting elongated shadows that danced like phantoms across the sand. Suddenly, the air cracked with fresh gunfire. An ambush sprung from a concealed Wadi Taliban fighters, emerging like specters from the rocks. There were at least 6, their AK-47s, barking in unison, bullets whizzing past her as she dove for cover behind a crumbling outcrop. Her heart raced, but training took over. She grabbed her radio, her Arabic fluency turning the enemy's chatter into an advantage. Eavesdropping on their unsecured frequency, she caught fragments. "The woman is alone. Circle and cut her off. Allah guides our aim." The words chilled her, revealing their plan to flank her position. But knowledge was power. She used it to anticipate their moves, whispering into her headset. "Fire Direction Center. This is Forward Observer Reynolds. Fire for effect. Grid 42 SQB. 1123-4789. Enemy troops in the open, high explosive 3 rounds. Fire for effect," she recalled from her father's lessons, a command to unleash full bombardment after initial ranging shots, maximizing destruction on confirmed targets. The artillery responded with thunderous precision, shells howling overhead, before impacting with earth-shaking force, scattering the ambushers in clouds of dust and debris. Educated in these terms through relentless study, Abby adjusted on the fly. Shift right 50, add 100, fire again. The barrage bought her time suppressing the enemy, long enough for her to slip away her M4 at the ready for any stragglers. This external clash tested her skills, but it also stirred a quiet pride. Her whisper had become a roar of command, saving her life in the process. Yet the enemies outside were only part of the gauntlet. Deeper threats awaited both from foes and from within her own ranks. As Abby pressed on the radio, in her vest, crackled to life, not with enemy voices, but with the furious bark of Major Harlan from base. Reynolds. "What the hell are you doing? We've got reports of unauthorized movement, your signal's pinging outside the wire. You're violating direct orders. Turn back now or face court-martial." His tone was a whip laced with the prejudice that had kept her sidelined for so long. "You're not qualified for this. Your communication's not infantry. Women like you don't belong in the fight. You'll get yourself and others killed." The words stung, echoing the mockery from Sergeant Vargas and amplifying her isolation in the vast desert. She could picture Harlan in the command center, his face red with rage, surrounded by maps and monitors that now betrayed her position. Doubt crept back in. Had she been foolish to defy him? The base's opposition felt like a second enemy, more insidious because it came from allies turned adversaries by bias. But then, a lifeline. Mia's voice cut in on a private channel, her allies' support, a beacon in the storm. "Abby, I've jammed your main tracker. They're seeing ghosts for now. Harlan's on the warpath, but I've got your back. Remember my abuela's stories. She faced down foremen who said women couldn't build war machines. You can do this." Mia's quick thinking hid Abby's true location, buying precious time amid the teammate opposition. Harlan raged on. "Reynolds, you're endangering the mission. We have protocols for a reason. Your emotions will be your downfall." But Abby muted the main freak, her resolve hardening. This test of loyalty revealed fractures in her unit, the prejudice not just words, but a barrier she had to shatter. Mia's encouragement, woven with tales of Dabuahut Wuntu's resilience, reminded her that true allies saw beyond labels. As the sun set, painting the sky in blood-red hues, Abby forged ahead, the radio's threats, a distant echo. Her path, now a solitary stand, against both external foes and internal betrayals. Deeper into the night, as stars pierced the Iraqi sky like distant hopes. Abby's journey confronted her most profound test, the inner challenges that clawed at her soul. The terrain grew treacherous, forcing her to skirt a small cluster of mud brick homes, remnants of a village scarred by years of conflict. That's when she heard it. Faint cries, amid the silence drawing her off her path, despite the risk. Creeping closer, she discovered a group of Iraqi civilians, huddled in the ruins, a family, their faces etched with fear. An injured child among them, no older than 10, clutching a bloodied leg from shrapnel, likely from earlier skirmishes. The sight pierced her heart. The boy's wide eyes mirrored the innocence lost in wars like this, evoking memories of her own childhood void. "Please, help," the mother whispered in broken English, her plea touching the humanitarian core Abby could never suppress. Despite the danger, every second delayed her from the seals. Abby knelt her medkit open, applying a tourniquet with steady hands. "It'll be okay," she soothed in Arabic, her voice a gentle anchor amid the chaos. This act of compassion touching hearts in its purity reminded her why she fought not for glory, but for the souls caught in the crossfire, much like the villagers her father had written about in Vietnam, where he'd risked patrols to aid locals. But mercy came at a cost. The noise attracted attention. A Taliban scout, drawn by the cries, fired from the shadows, the first bullet grazing her arm, searing pain that dropped her to one knee. Blood welled hot and sticky, But she fired back, her marksmanship true, neutralizing the threat. Clutching her wound, tears stung her eyes, not from pain alone, but from the weight of it all, the child's grateful gaze, the mother's thanks, the reminder that war demanded pieces of your soul. In that moment of vulnerability, she touched her eagle tattoo, its inked wings a tactile promise of strength. "Rise," she whispered, echoing her father's words, the inner challenge forging her anew. The boy safe, the family hidden, Abby bandaged her arm and moved on the scar, a badge of her humanity. This test wasn't just survival. It was affirming that her emotions, her weakness, were the very force driving her to endure, touching the compassion that made heroes human. The night deepened over the Iraqi desert stars, winking like distant sentinels, as Abby pushed onward, the wound from her earlier encounter, a throbbing reminder of the perils she'd already faced. The ravine near Sector 7 loomed ahead, a jagged scar in the earth that promised both cover and catastrophe. Her boots crunched softly on the sandy gravel, each step measured to avoid detection. Her navigation skills guiding her through the moonlit terrain she'd memorized so meticulously. The air grew thick with tension, the faint echoes of gunfire drifting on the wind, the sharp staccato of AK-47s clashing with the disciplined bursts of M4 carbines. It was the sound of desperate survival, the SEALs holding their ground against overwhelming odds. Abby's heart ached with empathy. Those men, like her father in Vietnam, were fighting not just for mission, but for each other, their bonds forged in blood and brotherhood. She crouched low, using a cluster of boulders for concealment, her radio in hand, as she tuned to the SEAL's frequency. Viper led. "This is Forward Observer Reynolds approaching from the south. What's your sit rep over?" Her voice was calm, professional, but laced with the quiet urgency of someone who cared deeply. Chief Kane's response came through static, strained and grateful. "Reynolds base said no support. We're pinned in the ravine, high ground overrun. Hayes and Ramirez are critical. We can't hold much longer. Grid confirm 42 SQB, 1456, 78980. The confirmation built the tension like a tightening coil. Abby visualized the position, the steep walls offering scant protection, the Taliban swarming like shadows. She could hear the chaos explosions from grenades, shouts in Pashto, the SEALs' return fire, growing sporadic as ammo dwindled. This was no abstract report. It was lives unraveling, evoking the letters her mother had read aloud about her father's last stand. The curiosity about the betrayal gnawed at her. Who on base had leaked the intel? But now, proximity sharpened her focus. The ravine's edge just ahead, a threshold to the heart of the storm. With every breath, the gunfire grew louder, pulling her inexorably forward. Her eagle tattoo, a silent vow to soar into the fray. The harsh barriers of the ravine revealed themselves as Abby descended the terrain, a nightmare of steep slopes and loose scree that threatened to betray her with every slip. The Taliban held the high ground, their positions commanding lethal fields of fire, muzzle flashes dotting the ridges like malevolent stars. Abby's forward observer skills, honed through her father's disciplined teachings, became her lifeline. As a FO, she was trained to direct artillery with pinpoint accuracy, bridging the gap between ground troops and distant batteries. Spotting enemy clusters, she keyed her radio. "Fire Direction Center. This is FO Reynolds. Request suppression fire grid 42S QB 1500 7900 enemy. On high ground, high explosive continuous rounds for 2 minutes. Suppression fire, she knew, was designed to pin down foes, forcing them to seek cover and buying precious time for maneuvers. The term rolled off her tongue with practiced ease, a procedure involving rapid, sustained bombardment to neutralize threats without direct hits. The artillery acknowledged, and soon shells whistled in, impacting with thunderous roars that shook the earth, clouds of dust and shrapnel obscuring the ridges. but the Taliban adapted quickly, their experience in asymmetric warfare turning the advantage. Sporadic fire continued, bullets ricocheting off rocks as Abi advanced. A harsh barrier emerged, a narrow ledge exposed to sniper fire, forcing her to low crawl through thorny scrub that tore at her uniform. Pain flared as a grazing shot clipped her calf, the wound light, but burning blood seeping into her boot. She nearly collapsed, then her body screaming for respite, the weight of gear and isolation pressing down. Why me? The doubt whispered, visions of failure flashing. The SEALs lost her, like her father, another casualty of war's cruelty. But memory intervened. Her dad's letters urging, when the barriers seem insurmountable, let your heart lead. It's the strength that rises. Clinging to that, she bandaged the wound, hastily, the eagle tattoo beneath her sleeve, a tactile anchor. Drawing on her FO expertise, she adjusted the fire. Shift left 100, add 50, suppress that ridge. The renewed barrage gave her the window to press on her light wound, a testament to endurance, nearly breaking her, but instead, forging resolve. The ravine's depths called the gunfire a siren song of impending reckoning. In the shadow of exhaustion, as the artillery's echoes faded, Abi teetered on the brink of surrender, the ravine's mouth a maw of uncertainty. The light wound, throbbed, sapping her strength, and the night's chill seeped into her bones, amplifying the frustration of a mission shrouded in betrayal. Overhearing radio chatter on an open enemy frec, pieced together through her Arabic, she caught damning fragments. The American's path was given. The insider delivered as promised. Her blood ran cold, suspecting the mission was sold out by base insiders. The leak, not accident, but treachery. Who Vargas's mockery flashed in her mind. Harlan's disdain, could prejudice hide something darker? The twist distracted, creating a whirlwind of curiosity and outrage. How deep did the rot go? Frustration boiled over. She'd risked everything defying orders, only to uncover a snake in her own nest. Nearly giving up, she slumped against a rock, tears of anger stinging her eyes, the whisper label mocking her now. The SEAL's gunfire sputtered in the distance, a reminder of stakes too high to abandon. "Is this what you faced, Dad?" she whispered, the betrayal echoing Vietnam's shadows of distrust and loss. But in that nadir, her mother's voice from letters resurfaced. Your father never quit, even when the world betrayed him. The curiosity about the insider spurred her answers, lay ahead in saving those men. Wiping her face, she rose, the eagle tattoo a beacon against despair. The inmost cave beckoned frustration, transforming into fierce determination. The ravine's depths swallowed Abi as she leapt down the jagged walls, closing in like the jaws of fate itself. The gunfire was deafening now, a symphony of chaos, where AK-47 rounds pinged off rocks and M4 responses grew feeble. Smoke hung thick in the air, mingling with the metallic tang of blood and cordite, evoking the hellish scenes her father had described in his Vietnam letters. There, amid the carnage, she spotted them, the SEALs huddled behind makeshift cover, an overturned vehicle, and scattered boulders. Chief Petty Officer Liam Kane, his face grim and smeared with dirt, directed the remnants of his team, while Petty Officers Hayes and Ramirez lay motionless, their wounds grievous. Hayes, with a chest hit that labored his breathing. Ramirez, bleeding from shrapnel in his abdomen and leg. "Viper-led Reynolds here, I've got eyes on you." Abi radioed, her voice cutting through the din as she slid into position beside Kane. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Base comms alone. You're either crazy or a godsend." The Taliban pressed their advantage, their shouts in Pashto echoing from the high ground, coordinating a final push. Abi assessed quickly, her forward observer instincts kicking in. "They're massing North Ridge. I'll call it in. Keying her radio, she barked. Fire direction center, FO Reynolds proximity, fused grid, 42S, QB, Wharf Team 556, 789 enemy concentration danger, close fire for effect. Proximity fused shells designed to detonate at optimal height for maximum shrapnel spread were a calculated risk near friendlies but essential here. The barrage answered swiftly, explosions blooming like deadly flowers forcing the attackers to falter. Seizing the moment, Abby turned to the wounded. Hayes, at 180 pounds plus gear, was dead weight, his body armor slick with blood. Drawing on off-duty training she'd pursued in secret, driven by her father's mantra of preparation, she hoisted him into a fireman's carry, draping his limp form across her shoulders, her athletic build distributing the load across her core and legs. The technique, a staple for evacuating the fallen, required leverage and resolve. Her knees buckled momentarily under the strain, but she locked them, channeling the eagle's strength inked on her back. "I've got you," she whispered to Hayes, his ragged breaths a motivator as she staggered forward, Ramirez's groans urging her to plan his extraction next. Kane covered her with suppressive fire, his team rallying around this unexpected savior. The artillery's roar provided a brief shield, but the ravine was a killing field, and Abby's heart swelled with the raw humanity of it all, saving these men not as a soldier, but as a daughter, honoring a legacy of compassion amid cruelty. The respite shattered as the Taliban regrouped their assault, renewing with ferocious intensity. Rounds zipped through the air, forcing Abby to drop Hayes behind a boulder and return fire, her M4 barking in controlled bursts. But the enemy adapted, flanking from multiple angles their high ground, turning the ravine into a trap. A bullet found her first, searing through her shoulder, spinning her with the force of a hammer blow. Pain exploded, hot and blinding blood soaking her uniform as her arm went numb. "Not now," she gritted, frustration boiling over at the weak label that haunted her, whisper too emotional, unfit for combat. How many times had Harlan and Vargas dismissed her? The prejudice fueled a rage that mixed with tears of agony, but she refused to yield, clamping down on the wound with her good hand. Staggering to Ramirez, she shouldered him too, his 170 pounds, an added torment, but her fireman's carry held legs pumping through the haze. Another shot grazed her thigh, tearing flesh and dropping her to one knee, the world tilting as blood loss blurred her vision. Frustration crested why fight a system that saw her heart as frailty. Yet those very emotions surged as strength memories of her mother's resilience after Vietnam pushing her up. Continuous suppression fire? She radioed, her voice a defiant roar despite the pain. Continuous suppression, a relentless barrage to keep heads down, buying time for movement. Grid adjust north, 50 west 100, keep it coming. The artillery obeyed, shells pounding the ridges in a symphony of destruction, allowing her to drag both SEALs toward better cover. Kane shouted encouragement. "Hold on, Reynolds, you're doing the impossible." But the third hit came a side wound just below her armor, ripping into her flank, internal fire spreading as she gasped. Frustration piqued the weak woman taunts echoing in her mind, but she called again. "Adjust fire, danger close, don't stop." The fourth grazed her head scalp, splitting blood streaming into her eyes, nearly collapsing her. Vision tunneling, body failing, she carried on, vowing through gritted teeth, "I won't let you down." The prejudice that frustrated her now ignited satisfaction's spark. She was proving them wrong, her weakness, the unyielding force hauling 2 lives from death's grasp. As artillery thundered, masking her labored breaths, Abby's world narrowed to the ravine's grim theater, where survival hung by threads of will. But amid the chaos, a voice cut through on her radio, not Kane's, but a familiar sneer. Sergeant Vargas patched in from base, his tone laced with panic. "Reynolds, you idiot, turn back. This isn't your fight." His words, meant to deter, carried an odd urgency, sparking the suspicion from earlier intercepts. Pressing forward with Hayes and Ramirez in tow, she overheard a burst on the enemy Frek Pashto mingled with English. "The sergeant promised easy prey. Payment secured." Her blood froze. Piecing it together, the betrayal crystallized Vargas. The mocker, the doubter, had sold the SEAL's position to the Taliban. For money, his prejudice a cover for greed. The unexpected twist hit like a grenade. The audience of her mind had fixated on external enemies, the faceless insurgents. But the true viper was from within, a teammate turned traitor. Frustration morphed into righteous fury. How many lives had his avarice endangered? Dropping the SEALs behind cover, Abby confronted the revelation, radioing Vargas directly. You leaked it! For what blood money?" His response crackled, defensive and damning. "You don't understand. Whisper the war's a game and I'm cashing out. Those SEALs were collateral." The admission was a dagger, surprising in its distraction. While Taliban fire rained, the internal rot exposed itself. Kane, overhearing, growled, "Traitor, handle him, Reynolds." With SEALs secure momentarily under suppression, fire, Abby spotted movement. Vargas incredibly had followed, perhaps to silence her emerging from shadows, with rifle raised. The confrontation was visceral, his smirk twisted into desperation as he aimed. "You should have stayed whispering," he snarled. But Abby, fueled by emotions he'd mocked, fired first, her marksmanship precise, the shot felling him before he could betray further. Satisfaction washed over her. Like a balm, the emotional woman had unmasked and ended the threat, proving that feelings weren't frailty, but the clarity to act when logic faltered. "Emotions save lives," she whispered, echoing her father's wisdom, the twist resolving in triumph. Kane nodded. Respect. "You just saved us all." As the ravine quieted under her called fire, the ordeal's peak left her battered but unbroken, her heart, the metal that turned tide. The ravine, once a cauldron of death, fell into an uneasy hush as the last echoes of gunfire faded, the air thick with smoke and the acrid scent of expended rounds. Abby slumped against a boulder, her body a map of agony. Shoulder throbbing, thigh burning, side, leaking life, head wound, pulsing with every heartbeat. Hayes and Ramirez lay beside her, their labored breaths a fragile victory amid the carnage. She'd done it, carried them through hell, called in the fire that turned the tide, unmasked the traitor whose greed had nearly doomed them all. But survival hung by a thread, her vision blurring from blood loss, the eagle tattoo on her back, now slick with sweat, and blood, a symbol tested to its limits. Chief Kane knelt nearby, his face a mask of awe and exhaustion, directing his remaining SEALs to secure the perimeter. "Hold on, Reynolds," he urged, his voice rough with respect. "Extraction's inbound. You bought us the time." The distant thrum of rotor blades grew a lifeline, cutting through the night sky, the UH-60 Black Hawk descending like an avenging angel into the hot landing zone. The helicopter's arrival was a whirlwind of dust and noise, its crew chief leaping out amid sporadic enemy fire, the door gunners laying down suppressive bursts to cover the evac. Kane and his team lifted Hayes and Ramirez aboard, first to their wounds, critical, the flight medic working frantically with IVs and bandages. Abby, her strength ebbing, felt hands pulling her up. Kane's strong grip steadying her as she staggered toward the bird. "You saved us with your heart, Reynolds," he said. His eyes locking on hers, the acknowledgement a balm to her battered spirit. "Not training, not gear, your damn stubborn refusal to let us die. I've seen elite operators crack. You rose." The words pierced her satisfaction, blooming amid the pain, a recognition that shattered the prejudices she'd battled. No more whisper. In his voice, she heard the echo of her father's pride, the legacy fulfilled. As they strapped her in the medevac, lifting off with tracers arcing harmlessly below, Abby touched her eagle tattoo through the torn uniform, the sword she'd seized, not of steel, but of unyielding emotion. It had carried her through betrayal and bullets, proving that strength wasn't detachment, but the fierce love that defies breaking. Aboard the Black Hawk, the roar of engines muffled the desert's fury, the flight a blur of medical urgency. The medic assessed her wounds, shoulder shattered but repairable thigh muscle, torn side puncture, narrowly missing vitals, head graze, superficial, yet dizzying. "How are you still conscious?" he marveled, starting fluids as Kane sat beside her, holding pressure on her side. "That tattoo of yours, Eagle, right? It must be your guardian." Abby managed a weak smile, the symbol's meaning crystallizing in victory. Freedom not just from enemies, but from the chains of doubt. Kane shared snippets of his team's gratitude, Hayes stirring faintly, Ramirez whispering thanks. Their survival, her gain and advantage rested from despair. The betrayal of Vargas, now a corpse in the ravine, would unravel the base's rot, her actions exposing the insider threat. Satisfaction deepened as she realized the ripple, her emotional stand, had not only saved lives, but challenged the system, echoing the quiet revolutions of 184 women like Mia's abuela, or the resilient mothers, back home, enduring Vietnam's scars. The eagle inked in grief after her father's death now felt alive. Its wings spread in triumph, a sword of strength forged in the heart's fire. As the chopper neared the trauma center at a larger base, the victory settled in a quiet glow amid the pain. Medeviced and alive, Abby glimpsed the desert receding below, a testament to what one resilient soul could achieve. Kane clasped her hand. "You're a hero, Reynolds, the kind that changes everything." The reward wasn't medals or promotions yet. It was this: the lives preserved, the prejudice pierced, the legacy honored. Her father's words rang true. Emotions had saved the day, turning a whisper into an unbreakable force. In that moment, soaring above the sands, Abby knew she'd seized her sword, ready to wield it against whatever shadows remained. The Black Hawk thundered through the Iraqi night, its rotors slicing the air like a promise of deliverance, carrying Abby and the SEALs away from the ravine's bloody embrace. Strapped to a stretcher amid the whine of engines and the medic's urgent ministrations, Abby felt the world sway her wounds, a symphony of fire that threatened to pull her under. The shoulder ached with every jolt. The thigh pulsed like a drum. The side wound seeped, despite pressure. Dressings and the head graze left her vision swimming in haze. Hayes and Ramirez lay nearby, stabilized but fragile, their survival, a testament to her defiance. Chief Kane sat vigil beside her, his hand steady on her arm, the recognition in his eyes a quiet anchor. "You seized the day, Reynolds," he said softly, his voice cutting through the din. "That eagle of yours, it's more than ink. It's the sword that cut through the darkness." But the journey home was no gentle glide. The desert below still harbored shadows, and victory's glow dimmed as alarms blared in the cockpit. "Incoming Taliban pursuit!" The pilot shouted, tracers arcing up from the ground like vengeful stars. The small twist unfolded with heart-stopping speed, remnants of the ambush, perhaps alerted by Vargas's final signals, before his end, had mobilized vehicles, their mounted machine guns chattering in pursuit. The chopper banked sharply evasive maneuvers, shaking the cabin, the crew gunners returning fire in bursts that lit the night. Wounded and fading, Abby refused to be a passive passenger. Her resilient heart, the very weakness others had scorned, surging once more. From her stretcher, she grabbed the radio handset the medic offered her, voice weak but resolute. "Fire direction center. This is F.O. Reynolds. Taliban pursuing extraction bird grid. 42 SQB, 1300, 7500. Continuous fire, high explosive, suppress and destroy. The call was her final artillery summons, a testament to the discipline her father had instilled through those yellowed letters. Even in retreat, protect your own. The batteries responded, shells streaking across the sky to impact behind them, explosions blooming in the pursuer's path, scattering vehicles and buying the chopper precious distance. Kane watched in awe. From a stretcher, you're unbreakable. The tension maintained its grip, the pursuit a reminder that war's claws didn't release easily, evoking the harrowing extractions her father had described from Vietnam choppers, dodging fire lives, balanced on the edge of valor and loss. Abby's thoughts turned to her mother, the woman who'd endured such weights, her quiet strength a mirror to this moment. The small twist of the chase heightened the drama, frustration mingling with fear, as rounds pinged off the hull, but satisfaction crept in as her call turned the tide. The artillery's roar, a symphony of salvation. This perilous road back highlighted the essence of SEAL rescue operations, known in military parlance as CSR combat, search and rescue. A specialized U.S. military endeavor, CSR, is designed to recover personnel in hostile environments, often downed pilots, or special operators like these SEALs, where every second counts amid enemy fire. Rooted in World War II efforts to save airmen over enemy lines, it evolved through conflicts like Vietnam, where helicopters like the Huey braved jungles to pull men from peril. In modern terms, CSR involves coordinated teams, para-rescue men, PJs, for medical aid combat controllers, for directing airstrikes and platforms like the Black Hawk, for hot extractions landings, under fire, as this one had been. The education in its mechanics underscores the heroism, pilots navigating threats, gunners suppressing foes, medics stabilizing the wounded mid-flight. Abby's role, though unauthorized, embodied its spirit, using artillery to cover the evac, turning a routine medevac into a CSR triumph. As the chopper pulled away, the Taliban fire dwindling under her final barrage, Abby gained not just survival, but an unspoken advantage. The betrayal exposed her actions would ripple through command, challenging the prejudices that had confined her. Kane squeezed her hand. "You've changed the game, Reynolds. Rest now. We're going home." The desert receded below the journey's unexpected challenges, forging a deeper victory, her eagle sword now sheathed in the quiet glow of lives preserved. Yet shadows lingered, the base awaited with investigations and reckonings that would test her anew. The Black Hawk touched down at the larger base's trauma center, amid a flurry of medical teams, the rotor's whine giving way to urgent shouts and the clang of gurneys. Abby was wheeled into surgery, her body a battlefield of its own, but her spirit unbroken by the road back's trials. Days blurred in recovery, painkillers clouding the edges, but clarity came with Colonel Elena Vargas's arrival, a no-nonsense officer with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. As an indirect mentor through her command presence, Elena led the investigation into the ambush, her probe uncovering layers of deceit. "Specialist Reynolds." She began in Abby's hospital room, her voice firm yet kind. "Your unauthorized actions saved lives, but we must address the breach." Reports flooded in intercepted comms, witness statements from Kane's team, and forensic analysis of Vargas's gear. The twist unraveled swiftly, Vargas's betrayal revealed through financial trails, linking him to Taliban intermediaries, his payment for the SEAL's coordinates, a greed-fueled stab in the back. Elena's eyes softened. He sold them out for a quick buck, using his position to leak intel. But you exposed him. The revelation cleared Abby of violating orders. In the chaos, her defiance was reframed as initiative under exigent circumstances, the court-martial threat dissolving like desert mirage. Kane's sworn statement sealed it. She wasn't rogue. She was the only one who acted, when betrayal blinded the rest. The investigation's findings rippled upward, vindicating Abby's heart-driven choices, turning her from outlier to exemplar. In that moment of absolution satisfaction bloomed the system's gears, shifting ever so slightly, acknowledging that emotion could illuminate truths logic overlooked. With clearance came transformation, the system's change unfolding like a long overdue dawn. Promoted to special operations training, Abby found herself at Fort Bragg, her wounds healed into scars that told stories of resilience. Colonel Vargas, now a direct advocate, pushed for policy shifts. Your actions echo the women of WWDOT, like my own mentors, who broke barriers in intelligence, or the nurses in Vietnam, who saved souls amid hell. Linking to those eras, she championed lifting restrictions on women in combat roles, citing Abby's feat as proof small stature, navigating ravines, larger frames, couldn't emotional investment driving preparation that saved the day. The Pentagon briefs highlighted her case in 2016's real-world lift of the band voices, like hers had paved the way, but Abby's story accelerated internal reforms, emphasizing psychological strength alongside physical. Policy must evolve, Elena argued in hearings, to harness hearts like Reynolds's, the kind that refuse to let prejudice dim potential. Abby's promotion to special ops wasn't just rank. It was a platform inspiring equality across ranks. Young female recruits sought her out, sharing tales of doubt mirroring her own, and she mentored them. Your emotions are your edge-forging bonds that win wars. The change inspired a broader equality touching on gender and beyond, valuing empathy in a machine of detachment. Satisfaction deepened as Abby saw the ripple lives like Hayes and Ramirez's preserved a system bending toward justice. Her father's Vietnam sacrifices echoed in modern victories. It was a quiet revolution proving that one woman's stand could reshape institutions, honoring the unsung heroines of past conflicts who paved the path. In the quiet aftermath, Abby's inner revival bloomed during a pilgrimage to her father's grave in Ohio, the eagle tattoo, now a healed emblem under her sleeve. The cemetery's gentle hills dotted with flags, fluttering in the breeze, evoked peace amid remembrance. Kneeling by the headstone, she traced his name, lost in Vietnam's jungles, but alive in her actions. "I did it, Dad," she whispered, tears tracing familiar paths, not of weakness, but release. The eagle, soaring high, felt alive, its wings unfurled in her mind, symbolizing the flight from doubt to triumph. Memories flooded her mother's letters, the base's prejudices, the ravine's fire, all converging in this moment of rebirth. Touching family emotions, she felt his presence, the man whose heart had guided her teaching, that emotions build legacies. "You were right," she said, the grave a confessional. "They save lives, forge change." Rising, she felt renewed, the inner wounds mending as the system's validation affirmed her worth. This revival wasn't just personal. It was a passing of the torch, her story inspiring others to embrace their hearts. As leaves rustled like applause, Abby walked away, eagle soaring, ready for whatever horizons awaited. 5 years had slipped by, like grains of desert sand, since that harrowing night in the ravine, and Colonel Abigail Reynolds now stood as a pillar of change within the very system that once sought to confine her. At the Pentagon, in a grand lecture hall filled with eager faces, young officers, policymakers, and veterans whose eyes held the wisdom of bygone battles, she shared her journey with a voice that carried the weight of hard-won authority. Her uniform bore the insignia of special operations, a promotion earned not through favoritism, but through the undeniable impact of her actions. In 2016, she began her tone resonant and reflective. The U.S. military fully opened all combat roles to women, a historic shift announced by Secretary Ash Carter in Washington, 15, building on the groundwork laid by Secretary Panetta's 2013 decision to lift the long-standing ban. But policies don't change, hearts people do. Drawing from the real timeline of integration, where women began filling previously closed billets in infantry artillery and special forces, Abby illustrated how her unauthorized rescue had become a catalyst. Her lectures influenced training curricula, emphasizing emotional resilience as a combat asset, much like the quiet determination of W1 codebreakers or the steadfast nurses in Vietnam's field hospitals. Young female soldiers approached her afterward, their voices trembling with aspiration. "Ma'am, they told me I was too sensitive for this life, but your story shows it's my strength." Abby mentored them, sharing tales of the ravine, the betrayal unmasked, and the lives saved, inspiring them to push boundaries. Her influence extended to policy briefings, where she advocated for inclusive evaluations, arguing that empathy drove superior preparation and unbreakable loyalty. The auditorium often fell silent, then erupted in applause. Her later career, a beacon for those who saw their own struggles, reflected seniors in the audience, nodding, recalling the barriers their daughters or granddaughters faced. Through it all, Abby's eagle tattoo remained her silent ally, a reminder that true advancement came from hearts that refused to be grounded. Emotions build a legacy of sacrifice. Abby would say, a humanitarian message distilled from the crucible of war and echoed in the letters that arrived like treasures from the seals she'd carried to safety. Hayes and Ramirez, now thriving in civilian lives, touched by her heroism, wrote with heartfelt gratitude, their words prompting profound discussions on resilience. "You didn't just save my body," Hayes penned in one shared during a lecture. "You saved my spirit, reminding me that caring deeply isn't weakness, but the foundation of endurance." The letters painted vivid pictures, Ramirez describing how he now coached youth sports, teaching kids that true strength lies in vulnerability, much like Abby's tears in the ravine had fueled her unyielding push. These missives read aloud to audiences sparked reflections, veterans sharing Vietnam stories of comrades who wept yet fought on, or Wentuarinu tales of families sacrificing at home with unwavering hope. The message resonated deeply, urging society to value emotional investment as the bedrock of sacrifice, not a flaw to be hidden. In group discussions that followed her talks, elders and youth alike debated resilience. How do we build a world where hearts lead without breaking? Abby's words prompted this her story, a mirror for personal legacies, the quiet acts of love that outlast battles. It fostered a sense of community, where sharing these letters encouraged others to recount their own tales of endurance, building bridges across generations. The humanitarian core touched hearts, reminding all that in the face of adversity, emotions weren't liabilities, but the enduring force that forges unbreakable bonds and lasting change. In a moment that lingered like an open promise, Abby met Hayes's daughter at a quiet veterans gathering, the young girl bright-eyed and full of wonder, handing her a handmade card with an eagle drawn in crayon. "My dad says you flew him to safety." The child said her innocence, a symbol of the next generation, inheriting the fruits of sacrifice. Abby knelt, embracing her tears, mingling with smiles. "And you'll fly even higher, little one with a heart full of courage." It was a poignant, close the legacy circling forward emotions, weaving eternal threads. "I once thought war was just guns, but now I know the heart is the unbeatable weapon, like the heroes you know from Vietnam." If this story touches you, like and share to spread inspiration, and subscribe to the channel for more about resilient people. Together, we preserve the patriotic legacy